Uncle Mud here in sunny Utah, Moab, Utah to be precise, which is, in my mind, actually a lot more like Colorado than Utah, but it's definitely Utah. Here at the Daughters of the Pioneers Historical Society, made from an old church right there. But what interests me really is this building here, which is supposed to be the oldest remaining log cabin in Moab. And you'll notice something about this log cabin compared to the log cabins where I live, is that it's made out of much smaller logs. These are maybe 6-8 inches in diameter, and that's because that's really all that was here. If you look around, like over there at the hillsides, we go way over there. Not much in the way of trees here. For them to have built log cabins out of, and they weren't very big. This one was built in 1881 by Randalph Stewart for his wife Marietta. And I'm sure it's been rebuilt a few times since then, because this stuff on the outside is definitely not chinking made from local mud like it would have been then. There's a bunch of compromises that have to be made if you're trying to keep an old building for people to look at. You may notice on the top here, they've got this metal awning thing over it to try to protect it a bit from when it rains, because the last layer of something somebody protected it with was this little bit of concrete and wire mesh that's crumbling because it doesn't expand and contract at the same rate as the bark below it. Which doesn't expand and contract at the same rate as the cement that they've chinked the logs with. So they're doing their best, or they were at the time when they tried to preserve this. And I'm glad it's still here. But you can see, like, when they built this thing, it was a pretty quick and rough job. They even left the bark on the logs, some of them. And these logs down here have weathered quite a bit, rotting a little bit down at the base. But you notice also that there's a lot more chinking space between the logs. They're like almost just stacked up. They're barely cut into each other here. Whereas back east, where you had bigger logs and more logs, you would have cut the chinking down to where it was just a little, mostly there's a little trace between there, and they would often used moss or sandy clay with straw just to fill that crack, rather than to actually, build up a big space between them. Because like here, it was a log cabin, because that's what the settlers knew how to build, and there were some logs here, but there weren't many logs, and they weren't very big. So they used what was local. Notice the low door, that I could actually bump my head on the top of that, which isn't really the case anymore with logs. With doors. They generally make them taller than that. Glass, even in the 1880s, would have been rare and hard to come by. So most likely they started out with animal skin stretched over that, or like a quilt hanging over it, or even like boards, if they could get milled boards. That looks like there was a mill a little ways up the canyon from here. They would have had these shutters that closed because the light was valuable inside, but they really didn't have anything. It didn't have much glass to go with. Yeah, you can see where the dirt that they would have layered over the top of the bark, over the top of the limbs there, is kind of rinsing off and down the side here. But that's what would have been the original top of this, as the is just a layer of mud. It doesn't rain that much down here, so some mud to keep out the heat and to keep some of the rain out would have been good enough. They wouldn't have had like cedar shakes here or anything like that. One thing about having a mud roof is that if you don't have a bark like from something big like a birch to layer over the limbs, then the long after the rain has stopped, you'll have dripping mud inside of the building, and often they would hang sheets or something under the ceiling to try to catch as much of the dust and even mud as they could from the roof, dripping inside of the building. So it's kind of cool that they've kept this building here and tried to preserve it. And I hope to see more of the buildings around here, because there was also a lot of adobe, and in fact there's even still some adobe building being done here in Moab. Why? Because there's sandy clay, which makes for an excellent source for adobe. So stay tuned. Unfortunately, I would show you more closely, but these guys are only open on Wednesdays, and I didn't get here on a Wednesday. But if you want to know more about this building, check out the Daughters of Utah Pioneers and their museum, because they're the ones who are keeping this alive for history. Thank you very much to them. Stay tuned for more from Uncle Mud.